3, 2.
All right, coming to you live from FXV Digital in beautiful Wyomissing, Pennsylvania. It's Fred Talk, the awesome podcast featuring awesome people. Visit us online at fxvdigital.com and your favorite social networks at FXV Digital. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. I am your host, Freddie Vasquez, and with me is my producer and cuter half, Angie Wicks. Today, our guest is a man who probably is best known for his days as a founder of Berkshire Baseball and Softball Club, later to be named the Big Vision Foundation, a nonprofit he ran for 30 years. Now he does some crazy traveling in an RV with his wife across the country, which we're definitely going to get into. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Dan Clouser.
Hey, Fred. Thanks for having me.
Right on, man. So we're going to start this off right out of the gate. You sold your home, all your possessions, you bought an RV. What inspired you to actually do what many of us wish we had the courage to pull off, my man?
So I think a lot of it was inspired by my mom. As I told you, last year when I first came up with this, my mom had gotten rid of all her stuff, took an old 1967 Plymouth Valiant, took the back seat out of it, put a bed in there, and converted that into a makeshift RV and decided to travel around the country. She later graduated to a 1978 Toyota camper and did all kinds of volunteering, helped with hurricane relief projects, helped with Ground Zero after 9/11. And in January of 2018, I took two road trips by myself. One was right after the first of the year. I drove down to Dallas to attend the ABCA convention, the American Baseball Coaching Association convention. And I went down there, ended up, instead of driving right back, drove down into Louisiana to visit some friends of mine, and then back to Pennsylvania. And then about a month later, again, drove by myself down to Orlando, Florida, to participate in a camp with Allie Krieger, who we were getting ready to do some soccer camps with at the complex at the time. And both those trips, there was just this, really strange type of serenity that came over me, because it was one of the first times in my life where I actually took the time to enjoy the journey.
Right.
Our organization, our teams traveled literally all over the country going to tournaments. We'd go to Myrtle Beach. We went out to Las Vegas for tournaments. We went to Galveston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Cocoa Beach, you name it. But there was always a strict schedule. We've got 50, 60 kids in tow. So it's like, okay, bus is getting to Old Country Buffet at 8 o'clock. Kids have till 9:15 to get everything eaten, back on the bus, back on the road, so that we get to the complex by 10:30 or whatever the case is. So there was never that time to really enjoy the journey itself. And both those trips, I took my time. I left earlier. When I went down to Orlando, I stopped and saw one of my old players in Atlanta, and we hung out for a little bit. And on the way back, I got off of 95 and, took some back roads. And that was one of the things my mom never did, was take interstates. I mean, she was always on, side roads, still roads you can go 50, 55 miles an hour on, but roads where you're going to see some stuff.
Let's say see real America.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think at that point is when it, started clicking, like, wow, man, I think I get it. I think finally, almost 15 years after my mother's passing, I'm understanding why she did what she did. So probably, sometime month or 2 months after that second road trip to Orlando, I started running it by my wife, like, hey, what would you think if we, sold everything and bought an RV and traveled around like Mom did. And
you're out of your mind, boy.
That was pretty close to the response. So took a while for her to warm up to the idea. And as we kept kind of creeping closer and closer, she was getting more and more excited about it than I think even I was. And, now at this point, and I think the only regret that we both have is that we didn't do it sooner.
Right on. Yeah, I remember. I think the last time I officially saw you guys was at Shank's house. I think he was having a little housewarming, and I remember my wife Jill was talking to her about like, how do you feel about doing this? And I mean, I guess she was excited, of course, but I could still see she was like, oh man, what am I getting myself into? Kind of, So, and how's she now? That's been like a few months.
She loves it. I mean, she really does. She, we just talk about how blessed we are to be able to do this so often. I mean, we left in August, so it's not, we're going on, 8-9 months that we've been doing this. And, we've seen so many things already.
Right.
We were up, we went up through New England in the fall, which was just, absolutely incredible.
Do you feel like you're missing out on things because it was COVID season?
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. I mean, because one of the things that, we wanted to do was to be able to tell the stories of people that we met through my podcast,
Right.
The Journey of My Mother's Son. And we just haven't really been able to do that, because people are definitely keeping their distances at campgrounds and that sort of thing. I mean, we've met a handful of people, but not many. But, that's all going to change, So we're, the one benefit to doing what we're doing during COVID is we are pretty much quarantined wherever we go. We're in a 33-foot RV regardless. And we can kind of stay to ourselves and still see a lot of things. We've done a lot of, hiking on trails and stuff like that. So we're, we don't put ourselves in, crowded places. We're able to get out there in nature and enjoy it. So as much as COVID has limited some of the stuff that we've, been able to do as far as meeting other people and interacting with them, we certainly don't feel totally shortchanged at all, because, I mean, there is a beautiful world to see out there that you don't need a bunch of people around you to see it. I mean, just taking a walk through a trail, in a state park somewhere can just be incredible.
Yeah, it's so cool, man, because I know I've always talked about going RVing when I get older, as they say, and I hope to leave enough time for Jill and I to go do that. I was always saying, well, I'll retire at 65. And I was like, no, I should probably retire at like 60. Now, honestly, my goal's 50. And I know I have less than 8 years, but you know what? I'm going to figure it out, man. I'm going to figure it out and figure out what I have to do to get there, because your story is one where I'm like, man, what I would give to just be like, you know what? I'm out. And that's like, that's so powerful to be able to have your mind in that place, to just be like, you know what, man? I'm going to go against what society thinks is normal and just go, I don't need my house anymore. I don't need possessions anymore. I mean, I was at that yard sale too, man. I got some cool things, which I love it, but I was like, wow, he's doing it, man. He's like, I'm buying just take whatever you want. And it was just so cool to be so free, because my buddy Mike, his like poet name is Clarity, but my buddy Mike, he's been doing this for years. I remember one day he told me that he was working at a central station, was just like for like alarm company. And he said that one day he just got up and said, I'm done, and walked out of that gig. And I've been watching his journey on social media. He's been to Hawaii, but worked on farms out there, worked the land in California. He went to Thailand at some point. He was in like Asia. And I think now he's back in California. But he's just like you, no wife, but he has a small RV and just goes. And I'm like, man, that's to have the balls. It's really just to have the balls to do it.
Yeah,
it's remarkable.
And it is definitely, there's no doubt there's a freedom in what we do. Unfortunately, we got to Pennsylvania about 3 weeks earlier than we were originally planning on, due to the passing of a friend of ours. But by the same token, my wife and I talked about making the trip up to Tim's funeral on a Sunday morning, and 10 o'clock Sunday evening, we were heading north. And there's not a whole lot of people who can do that, regardless of whether you want to or not. So, there is most definitely a freedom in what we do. And, nowadays, when we first started doing this, my one daughter got us a book called A Beginner's Guide to Living Full-Time in an RV. And I think that book was published around 2018. And at that time, there were 1 million people in the United States that were living in an RV full-time.
Really?
I'd have to say that number is probably up significantly now. So there's a lot of people that are doing this, and they're not all retired. There's a lot of people who are working, and with technology nowadays, there's a lot to do. And I'm not officially retired. I'm still, I'm kind of in a pause right now because of COVID, but I'll be doing coaching workshops for an organization called Positive Coaching Alliance. I'm still, writing and, obviously with the blog, but then, my first book is in the process of being republished, and,
You can put that up there, Angie. Check it out.
I got you.
so,
and if you're cool like me, you might even get it autographed. I made sure I got it autographed.
Shoot, you
That's
got the hookup.
Right there.
yeah, and
by
that's
the man
actually
himself.
a collector's item now, because the new version will have a completely different cover. It's got 10 or 11 new chapters.
Wow. So you really updated it.
Yeah, and I forget. I think my publisher is actually doing it in hardcover as well.
Hardcover.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I definitely I love the
That's pretty
hardcovers.
legit. It's
Yeah, I
pretty
love the
legit. It's
hardcovers.
awesome.
And it's the beauty of a diamond through the eyes of a coach, and we're talking baseball. And if you don't know me by now, I got to be one of the biggest fans on the planet. I love my New York Mets. You love your Boston Red Sox.
Sure do.
Which I love that.
1986.
I'm sorry, but I love you for 04. That was so remarkable. Because in 03, I was so disappointed. I don't know why Pedro
As
was
was
still in
I.
that game. But 04 was remarkable. And I'm not sorry about saying that, Yankees fans. Yeah, you go ahead and eat it. There you go. So, all right, baseball. You've done a lot with baseball. I don't even feel like I know your whole story because I only got to meet you on the end of your career with Big Vision. But you started the Berkshire baseball and softball club, and you were there for 30 years. So, and you don't look like an old dude. So, tell me that story, man. I know you probably grew up loving baseball. Just you and I probably did the same things for the most part, but 30 years of running that place, you were there kind of early.
20 years old.
20 years old.
20 years old.
And I was screwing around at 20 years old. And you're like, I'm just going to start this league.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was working at Meridian Bank, which is no longer anymore. It's now, I guess, Wells Fargo is what it's morphed to after multiple takeovers. But I played 1 year of slow pitch softball. And I remember talking to my boss, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, man, I don't know that I can do this. Like, softball's not baseball.
Well, no.
Slow pitch softball is just not baseball. And at their time, there was an amateur baseball league locally here called the Lebanon Valley League, but they'd only played weekends. There were no weeknight adult baseball leagues around here at the time. So, I'm talking to my boss, Russ Herbine, and we were members of the Spring Lawn Optimist Club. And Russ brought up to me, he's like, hey, if you want to start an adult baseball league, we could probably get the Optimist Club to sponsor it. And I'm like, hey, if you think that's an option,
Why not?
sure. And again, the beauty of being 20 years old is you just don't care.
Yeah.
Like you don't know. As I look back at it now and I tell people the story, and I tell people I was 20 years old when I started the organization, they're like, you were 20 years old? For me, it was just what, I was 20 years old. Who cares, So he knew the editor of the Reading Eagle at the time, Al Norino, and we went down and talked to him. And Al was a big baseball fan, and turned into like an hour and a half conversation.
Right on.
He brings in the sports editor, Mike Zielinski at the time, and starts telling him, and they're actually talking about how they're going to lay out the article, in the sports section.
That's awesome.
Dates and stuff like that. So they do an article on it. We have a meeting. We ended up, having 4 teams in that first year. Obviously the one team was, our team, the Berkshire Red Sox.
Of course.
And I got, thrown into coaching at a very young age and coaching guys who were, several years my senior. But again, it didn't seem awkward to me because everybody accepted me for what I was.
Which is remarkable, because I think even before we started this podcast, I was like, how did they handle being coached by a 20-something-year-old ball player, and these guys are 30-some 40s? Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, as I look back, I really understand, and I've never put a lot of weight on people's ages. When I was running the organization, and we got to a point where we had full-time staff and stuff like that. I didn't care how young a person was or how old a person was. It was just what were they bringing to the table. Right on.
And I think part of that is because of the way, a lot of these guys, embraced me. And even, probably the ones I was more concerned about, even more so than the guys that were older than me that I was coaching, were actually the ones that I played high school baseball with. And, we were buddies. And it's like, how are they going to react to me being a coach? Because, again, you're now a leader, but you were just peers, a couple years ago on the high school baseball field. And, again, just very fortunate that we, it worked out and everybody kind of embraced it and saw it for what it was. And then, fast forward 10 years, we started adding youth teams. And, another 10 years, it no longer became just a volunteer organization. It was big enough and we'd expanded to the point where it's like we actually need to, hire someone. So, how about we hire you, Dan? Seems how you started this whole thing, So, so the first 20 years of my 30-year tenure were as a volunteer and still out, working for 84 Lumber and Wicks Lumber, selling building materials and working for a bank and, kitchen manufacturer and this and that. And, got the chance to actually turn it into a vocation and loved every minute of it. And I think that's the other thing that I've explained to people is like when we made this decision to leave this and do what we're doing, I loved what I was doing.
Right.
Like I loved what I was doing, but it just seemed as though, the Lord was saying like, look, there's more for you out there. You did what you had to do here. Now it's time to move on. Because if you would have talked to me in 2018, I'd have told you, you're going to bury me on that field.
Mm-hmm. And they still might.
They still might. So, yeah, I mean, you don't have to be in a situation where you hate your job or you hate your career, or you hate what you're doing. You can still make a change and understand that there's just so much more out there to explore. And I know, now I wish I would have asked my mom more questions as to why she had done it. But as I'm doing it, I'm kind of getting a lot of those answers already. Because the only thing she had told me when she first told me she was going to do this was that, a couple of her friends had just gotten back from vacations in Europe and the Caribbean and, all over the world. And she just got to thinking that, God gave us this incredibly beautiful country right here. And most of us don't take the time to enjoy it.
That's true.
And that's what she decided she was going to do. She didn't need to go to, the Bahamas or, South America or Europe or anything like that. She could just get in her car and drive.
So she stood in the States, drove in the 70s, I take it.
80s.
Now, is this pre-Dan or post-Dan?
So I was actually, my mom and dad got divorced in 1979 when I was 9.5 years old. I moved to Florida with my mom for about 4.5 years and came back up to Pennsylvania in 9th grade. So at this point, I was up here in Pennsylvania. She was now in Florida. And she was she was in a relationship with who would become my stepfather. But when she first got this idea, I mean, she was making good money. Again, we're in the mid 80s, and she's selling insurance for a company called Life of Georgia, and she just decided she was going to quit and do this. And when she was telling my future stepfather what she wanted to do, he was a retired full bird colonel from the United States Army, and he was about 15 years older than her, so she's in her mid 40s. And he's saying, look, Loretta, I love your ambition, I love what you want to do, but I did all of my traveling in the military.
Yeah. And
she's like, oh no, Gene, you don't understand. I'm not inviting you. I'm just telling you what I'm going to do. Which kind of gave him the heebie-jeebies a little bit, because he's concerned about health care, which wasn't near as big of a concern as it is today.
Right.
But was still a concern then. He was concerned about her safety. Again, being a single woman in the mid 80s. So they went out, bought her a little 38 Special that she kept under the driver's seat. Thank God she never had to discharge it. She left Florida, went across the southern U.S., into California, got to San Diego. Gene flew from Florida to San Diego, met her in San Diego. They drove to Tijuana, got married, drove back to San Diego. He got in a plane back to Florida. She drove up the Pacific Coast Highway up through Oregon, Washington, Canada, into Alaska. But now she was a spouse of a retired military veteran, so she'd go to any Army base and go to the barracks or go to the PX and the commissary and shop and had benefits.
Wait, so that's awesome, but I got to bring it back. Yes. She drove to Alaska?
Yes.
You can drive to Alaska.
Got to go through Canada, which is difficult right now.
Well, yeah,
you can't get into Canada
tomorrow
right now. But yes,
wow.
You can drive to Alaska.
Did she tell you any stories about like driving to Alaska?
She loved Alaska, which is one of the things it's definitely on our checklist.
Yeah.
Sandy and I got our passports renewed. We had let them expire, unfortunately, but we did get them renewed. We just got them back. So as soon as Canada opens up, that we can drive through it and get up into Alaska, we will do that. And I'm looking forward to it, because my mom just talked about just how beautiful the country was. Absolutely beautiful.
How what's your favorite Alaska story your mom gave you? I'm so fascinated by that place.
Just, I guess the one that not really a story per se, but just obviously you want to go up there in the summer.
Yeah.
Just about how amazing it is to me to try to comprehend the length of daylight in Alaska in the summer. And just her telling me about how there would be 3 hours of darkness in the summer, stuff like that. Man. And again, depending on when you go up there, if you go up there right around the solstice, I mean, there's times where, depending on where you're at, I mean, it literally kind of gets dusk and then
it comes back.
Yeah. So, so I'm looking forward to that. Just being able to kind of, comprehend it being daylight for that long of a period of time, just because you're in a different part of the earth,
right,
than where we are.
Yeah, I know it's wild, man. And I'm really fascinated by your mom, and we had this discussion before about your mom, and maybe not fully, but I mean, now that we're here talking, your mom did a lot of volunteer work, so it wasn't just about visiting the country. She actually went around and did a lot of volunteer work, and being that's 20 years just about of 9/11, you had some really great stories about what she was doing at Ground Zero and all this, all the great things she was doing. So if you don't mind maybe sharing a thing or two about like what she did at Ground Zero on 9/11.
Yeah, so she did the bulk of her volunteer work with the Salvation Army. So when she went up to 9/11 to Ground Zero, she was working in the tent that basically served all of the relief workers. She worked the third shift, but again, relief work was going around the clock. There was no off shift at that time. So, if there's one thing that my mom, I guess, really enjoyed doing for people was feeding them, you know. So she would be on a roof doing a tarp after a hurricane, but I think where she was really in her element was being able to feed people. So that's what she did at Ground Zero. And we went up there for Mother's Day of 2002. And by this time, she had graduated from her Valiant into her 1978 Toyota Camper. She had it parked right along the Port Authority. And, when she first got there, I'm very introverted by nature. My mom was the exact opposite. She could start a conversation with anyone, anywhere, about anything, anytime. So she gets there. First thing she does, she finds, the police chief and explains to him, hey, I'm going to be staying here. I'm volunteering at the tent. I'm working the third shift. I'll be sleeping in the camper during the day. Just wanted to let you know. And, right off the bat, they're like, well, we're gonna create a route to go past your camper a couple times during the day when you're sleeping, just to make sure nobody's messing with you.
Wow.
So she just had that type of, flair and could connect with people so quickly that, she didn't even ask, and they're offering, well, this is what we're going to do to make sure you're protected. And when we went up there for Mother's Day, she took us into churches and areas that she could only get into because of her badge, basically. We could have never gotten into these places. And I remember the one church we went into, her telling us that it was really a spot where a lot of the volunteers would just come in to kind of decompress. And, as soon as you walked in, there was just a heaviness as you walked in this place. But she would tell us that on days where they would find a body or a body part, that when you walked in that church, it was even, 10 times heavier than what it was the day we were. And, this is May 2002 for Mother's Day. So you're, 7-8 months after it had happened, and they're still pulling bodies out of the rubble. And then when we went back to the tent, the one thing I just remember was, in typical fashion of my mother, was everyone that she was introducing us to would refer to her as Mom. So nobody called her Loretta; they all called her Mom. So just seeing that was really cool. And then after she passed away, seeing letters and cards from people that she stayed in contact that had volunteered there with her. A few years later, she went up to Nova Scotia because she had met, a couple families that had come down and volunteered and stayed in touch, and people in Ohio, and all kinds of things. So she had a great knack of staying in touch with people, and that's one of the things that Sandy and I have really enjoyed the most, is being able to get together with some of my old players that are now, again, scattered throughout the country, and, people like that. So the one thing that, we haven't been able to meet a whole lot of new people because of COVID, but we have been able to reconnect with a lot of old people. And there's still some of our friends who will reach out to them. They're like, hey, you know what? Let's get together once COVID settles down. And I understand that completely. But there've been a lot that we've been able to connect with: family, old friends, old players, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, you definitely stood in contact with me because I received that postcard, which was so cool, man, because I was like, wow, a postcard with the written word on it.
Yeah.
It was such a great surprise, man. I really appreciated that postcard.
Yeah, and I've heard that from a lot of people, and that's kind of turned into a thing for us because, again, and I don't even know what struck me. I mean, we were, going through some, actually it was at Woodstock, I believe, when we went up to Woodstock. And I saw a rack of postcards. I'm saying to my wife, I'm like, man, they still sell postcards?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know a postcard was even a thing. I'm like, you know what? Let's grab some and let's start sending some postcards.
Yeah.
And, to me, man, I wish I could remember who had told me, I don't remember if it was when I was working for Wix at a sales seminar, but someone I heard speaking years and years ago had talked about when you get a written note from someone, like how that really, really means a lot, because you took time to sit down, write it out, and send it. And he was really referencing it and like just sending like short thank yous to builders after a sale or something. So that's kind of clicked. I'm like, wow, you know what? Again, postcards are such a rare thing, and people just writing anymore, because we're so used to this or this.
So true.
So it's like, I think that'd be a pretty cool thing for us to just start, sending out postcards randomly. So we've sent out a bunch, and it's really funny because you also get to see the inconsistency in the mail right now, because you can send, postcards to neighbors. And well, actually, two of our grandkids, we sent postcards the exact same day. One got it like on a Monday, the next didn't get it till Saturday, and they're from the same post office to the same address, and it just showed up 4 or 5
people are
different
still
late.
sending me photos of my Christmas card.
Yeah,
as recently as like 2 weeks ago, Pete Guerreri, I don't know if you know him, but
yeah,
great dude. He's like, hey, I thought you sent me like a birthday card or something. Open up, it's a Christmas card.
It's crazy.
I was like, well, happy birthday, by the way, and you're awesome. But you make a great point about the written word, because I received a letter last week from Lindsay Christ from the Reading Public Museum. And she's awesome. And she was just letting me know about, I think, Dogs and Brews that's going to be happening. I believe it's in May. And she just wrote on there. And she was like, hey, would love if you were here. Bring the pup, have a beer, Lindsay. And I ran into her, ironically, like a day or two later, walking up when it was beautiful out last week. And I talked to her, and I was like, hey, man, I want to tell you that you writing on that letter, and even that little small, quick little note, was awesome, and I appreciated it. And I mean, I know we're friends and stuff, and it's great, but like, I was like, if you do that for everybody, that's a great thing, because from a, maybe a marketing standpoint, like I tell these guys all the time, devil's in the details, and that written anything will just take you so far. Yeah. And I mean, it's on my caulkboard in my office, your postcard. So, I mean, it's definitely cool. And you definitely seem like an old school kind of guy, which is great. I mean, you love the Red Sox, you love baseball, you write postcards, you're visiting the country, doing everything I wish I was doing, which is...
He's just a simple man. He's honestly just a simple man, living for the little things in life.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
little things,
man. It's all about the little things. And so... let's bring it back to you, man. So you're on the road, you're RVing, you're checking out the country, you did baseball your whole life, you helped out all these kids. This might sound like a crazy question, but like, what's next?
I don't know. I know, one of the things we would tell everybody before we started is that the beauty of our plan is that there isn't really much of a plan.
Right.
We did get up here a few weeks earlier than we thought. At one point, we didn't know if we would make it up here or when we would make it up here, because we're actually still waiting on a couple warranty parts at an RV dealership down in Florida. But we just got to the point where it's like, we can wait for RV parts while we're driving or while we're sitting in Florida. So let's just, get going. And we'll deal with it when they come in.
Right.
We can get there. So we know we'll be here till May 10th. At that point, we'll head back to Florida for a little bit, just because our temporary tag expires on May 10th, because we become Florida residents. Our domicile address is in Florida, and then we'll be back up here sometime in the middle of June. I know we're going to Knoebels for a couple days in June to camp out there with my wife's sister. So we're looking forward to that in late June and July.
Knoebels, another mention. Last week, both days was talking about Knoebels. We were sponsored by Knoebels last week.
Nice.
And here it is again.
Nice.
Fred Talk's brought to you by Knoebels.
There you go. You should send them a bill.
Right? I'm gonna. You're getting one tomorrow.
And then we'll be here probably till the middle of July, and after that we're heading west out to Washington State. One of my friends, one of my cousin's friends' fathers. He's 80 years old. We met him when we were visiting my cousin in Largo, Florida, which is over by Clearwater, Tampa area. He's 80 years old. He had just driven from Washington State to Largo, Florida. He had full-time RV'd for 4 or 5, 6 years. I forget the exact time. I actually did a podcast with him a little while ago. So he lives on San Juan Island, which is right off of Washington State. And he invited us out there. He's got full hookups. He's got a 32-foot boat that he just bought not too long ago that he wants to take us out on. So we'll probably go across the northern U.S., out to Washington State, spend some days out there with Ron. My cousin and his son are actually going to be meeting us up there. And then after that, we'll probably head, again, depending on if we can go through Canada, we may at that point decide to go up into Alaska.
Right on.
And if not, we'll go south through California and then across the southern U.S. There's no timetable, but one of the things I want to do is hike the Grand Canyon from rim to rim.
Wow.
I got a friend of mine, Michelle DeLoso, who is actually a guide for that. And there's a lot of people who have hiked portions of the Grand Canyon, but not a whole lot who have gone rim to rim. And it's only like a 22, 24-mile hike, so you usually break it up into 2 days.
Only.
So so I'm looking forward to doing that. And we know that we're going to spend the holidays next year in Beaumont, Texas, at a place called the Dream Center, which we were there this past August when we went down. We went down to volunteer with some, again, ironically, some hurricane relief effort in Louisiana. We ended up going into Texas and volunteered at the Dream Center in Beaumont for about a week, and really connected there. It's a faith-based drug and alcohol rehabilitation center, which again was kind of ironic that we found ourselves there because one of the things my mom did after she stopped traveling full-time is when she got back to Florida, she went back to school and became a drug and alcohol addictions counselor.
Wow.
So we really hit it off there with Mike and Vilma, the two people that run the center, and I think we're going to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with them, and the guys are in their disciple program out there, and then we'll probably go back to Florida. So there's a little bit of a plan, but it's all fluid as well.
Right on, man. So how many baseball games are you going to fit in there?
I don't know. We ended up coming up here right as spring training games were starting, so I didn't actually see any. We went to several empty stadiums in January and February, just to check them out. Actually, I think I tagged you in a post at the Mets stadium in Port St. Lucie.
It's all done over now.
Yeah.
From when I saw it last,
Yeah,
it's like totally blue and
really,
oranged out.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really
Right on.
nice. I would have loved to actually seen a game there. But we'll definitely fit some games in. I mean, on the way out west, I definitely want to stop out at the Field of Dreams
Yes.
place.
Yeah.
I think that would be very, very cool.
Have you? Is that on your list? Hitting the 30, all the ballparks.
Yeah, but it's
I'm not saying necessarily on the trip,
right? Yeah,
Right,
it'll kind of
but-
come organically. Hey, look, the Indians are in town. We're in town. Let's go. Let's go to a game. So,
That's on my list. It's
Yeah.
definitely. I've made a bucket list of sorts for myself, and obviously, I have to hit all 30, man. Baseball is. Excuse me. Baseball is just. I think it's just the greatest game, and I know a lot of people they put it down. They like football or whatever the hell else they're watching these days, but I think it's just the greatest game. I think. It's kind of like, if you watch that baseball documentary, it's like that one gentleman talked about how baseball's like jazz, and how it's played out. And there's something to be said about going to all these ballparks too, because of course, if I'm going RVing, I mean, I'm going to try to do everything around baseball games, at least for a lot of it, because I want to check out all the parks. I know one of my other dreams is to get to Japan, you know, and watch a game in Japan. You know, like it's huge over there, man. I mean, they love baseball. And I remember when my buddy went to Japan, I was like, hey, man, can you just bring me back some baseball cards? You know, it was one of the things I wanted from there. So, yeah, man, I hope you get to check out a lot of games, especially in Seattle, those places out there.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, for me, one of the things that makes baseball so cool is that when you're talking about stadiums, is every one of those stadiums you go to, every one of them, the mound is 60 feet 6 inches from the plate.
Right on.
The bases are 90 feet apart, but they all have their own character. You know, you got Fenway with the Green Monster. Got, you know, Wrigley with, you know, ivy on the fence. You got, you know, just everyone has its own character. You know, Camden Yards, the warehouse in right field. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so unique. You know, because all of those affect how the game is played.
Right.
You know, I mean, football, basketball, the stadiums are different, but at the end of the day, you know,
it's the same rectangle.
Yeah, it's the same rectangle. Nothing's different about it.
That's it.
You know, where a rookie left fielder for the Brewers, you know, coming into Fenway Park, you know, that's a, you know, that's a adjustment.
Yes. And you know, and it's funny you mentioned, because we went to Wrigley in 18 with my wife. My wife took me on a trip as a gift, and my wife, she tolerates baseball. She may think I'm nuts. I'm like, I know, you know, I watch baseball. She'll just watch it with me or whatever. You know, she tolerates it. She kind of likes it. But of course, we went to Wrigley. We went to both stadiums, and you know, we go to Wrigley. And had a great time. And she had a great time, apparently. So much so that the next day, we were like, all right, what do you want to do today? Because even though she took me, and I'm always looking out for my wife. So I'm like, what do you want to do today? And I don't want to make it all about me and all that crap. She's like, I kind of want to go back to Wrigley today. And I was like, what? You want to go watch, like, baseball? Like, you want to go watch baseball? And she was like, yeah, there's something about Wrigley, something about the people there. So we went again, and she just fell in love with, you know, the people, fell in love with the town, fell in love with Go Cubs Go, that whole song, fell in love with freaking Javi Baez, you know, of course. And I mean, that dude's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, forget about it. He's just remarkable. And that meant a lot to me that she really just loved the game, even at that place so much. I bought one of those bricks like they put in the ground, and I haven't bought that for the Mets at all, or any other team.
That's
cool. So, and the brick actually says like Freddie and Joe, May 7th, 8th, 2018, Go Cubs Go. And so it'll be at Wrigley next time we go there. We can go check it out.
That's awesome.
But baseball is just one of those things where, like, yeah, it has its own character, has its own story. I think growing up, there's always a connection between, you know, dads and their sons. Or for me, it's me and my daughter. You know, we go to opening day every year now. That's like our thing. I think it definitely connects American history. Like you can always base history in America with the game of baseball. You don't really ever talk about football or any other sport for that matter. But when you talk about World War II, you know, like everybody loves that thing, Band of Brothers, that great special. Guess what they were playing at the end of the series? It was baseball. Like it's always been there. It will always be there. You know, so I think it's just one of those great things that we've been given here in the States. And I think they should be left alone. I'm so sick of them changing the game already. But you should definitely go and visit. When you're visiting the country, go check out the ballparks, man. Because I love Fenway. Fenway's a great town. Wrigley, great town. I've never seen a game at Fenway, unfortunately. Every time I go there, there's no game.
Really?
Which is, the last time I was there, terrible. I don't know if I told you the story. So we go to Boston to look at schools for my kid, Adri, and my other daughter. And I remember earlier that year, I was like, when are we going to Boston? They're like, oh, we're going this weekend. I'm like, the Mets are playing the Red Sox that weekend. Have to go to a game, right? Have to go. And right away, Adrian and my wife were like, we're not there for you. We're there for me, for my kid and baseball. I mean, and in college. I'm like, okay, you're right. We're there. And then it came a point where I didn't know where I was. I'm not like this Bostonian that knows where everything is. So we're by BC, I believe. Okay. And then there's a pizza parlor diagonal from where we were at the gift shop called Uno or something, right? Like the chain place. Little do I know that where I'm sitting in the place, I see a bridge. The bridge goes to Fenway. And so I'm sitting there.
You're probably right under the Citgo sign almost.
Yes. And they're in there. We're eating pizza. I'm trying to keep my composure. I'm totally fine. They go to the bathroom at one point, and I could almost cry. And I'm watching this. I'm like, and I think I called my buddy Russ up. I think I did, because Russ is my lawyer. He's out here, Russ Farbiar's huge Mets fan, just like me. He's from Long Island and everything. Love the guy. And I'm like, Russ, I'm sitting in this pizza shop, man, and I'm watching Mets and Red Sox fans go into the ball game. There's nothing left else for us to do today. I definitely could have went to this game and hindered nothing. And I'm sitting here, and it's bad enough that it's Fenway. I've never watched a game, and I see a game happening, but the Mets are playing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, and some people just don't understand. But like, I think that's what baseball does to people. It makes you love it so much that event is a big deal.
Yeah.
That's how important it is to some people. At least to me, it's super important.
I can relate to that completely. And it's funny because I think for a really large part of our relationship, my wife was the same way.
Yeah.
She just tolerated it. And actually the first time we went to Fenway is, I think, what really kind of turned her around, because, it's just a complete, carnival atmosphere going on there. And we had gone to games at the old vet at that point and some stuff like that, but it just wasn't the same feel. Fenway, they had Yawkey Way closed down, and just everything's going on in there. That it was just a completely different atmosphere. So I think that's finally what ended up getting her kind of turned on to the game and everything else.
For you,
and
it was
understanding
Fenway.
it. Yeah.
For me, it was Wrigley.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And I think the other thing with baseball that that I love so much is, and I talk about this in my book a little bit, where I think it's it's really the only sport where every sport you rely on teamwork.
Sure.
But in the game of baseball, I think it's just emphasized so much more, because if the game's on the line and your number 9 hitter is coming up to the plate, in the bottom of the 9th of a tie ball game, you can't call a timeout.
No.
And put your number 4 hitter in that spot. Where basketball, if the game's on the line, you're getting the ball into your best shooter's hands.
Right.
I mean, how many game-winning shots did Jordan not take?
Right.
There were a couple where they designed to play around him, but I would say probably about 98% of the time when the game was on the line, the ball's going into his hands. Same thing with football. You're going to get the ball in your best playmaker's hands. You're either getting it to Barry Sanders or Emmitt Smith or Walter Payton, or, going to let Tom Brady decide it, where you don't have that in baseball. You've got to deal, so in that situation, you're either rolling the dice with your number 9 hitter, or you're putting a pinch hitter in who's, been sitting there cold for the past 2.5, 3 hours and hasn't seen a pitch since BP,
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that really just has always drawn me to the game, is that it really puts a huge emphasis on teamwork. And I think that's one of the things that, we can all relate to going into the business world as well, is that it makes a difference. It makes a difference, and you got to be able to work as a team no matter what situation you're in business.
Oh, man. You got to tell me that. I mean, if it wasn't for Angie, I wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. So it's definitely a team effort. I will always love the game. there's just, and yeah, you're right, man. It is like business. You need a team, you know, and you always have to work with what you're given. You know, there's like never subbing things out. You know, you're making the right decision by picking up this player. Are you making the right decision by hiring this person? You know, they're the right one for the job, because when their time comes, you need to be able to depend on them to do all those things. You know, like you were saying, you can sub out the number 9 hitter, but you're going to sub them out with somebody who hasn't hit since BP.
Right.
And then when you sub them out, can they play the field? Or
Right.
are you going to sub out another person because the guy can't play right field or whatever you're replacing? So, yeah, man. I mean, that's the game for me. I mean, there's so many things about life that you can relate to in that game. And it's definitely talked about in your book, you know, the beauty of a diamond through the eyes of a coach, which everybody should try to get. Like, and now, is this still available on Amazon? Or wait for the new one?
It's out of print. You can get used copies of it on Amazon.
Used copies. I'm not selling this one.
And they're pretty cheap used, $5, $6, $4 I've seen. But it is out of print.
But the new one's coming out.
New one should be out in probably early to mid-May.
Early to mid-May. Is it going to be available in all the usual outlets?
Yep.
Right on. Hardcover, Beauty of a Diamond Through the Eyes of a Coach by Dan Clouser is coming out in mid-May. Mid-May. Hardcover. If you're cool like me, maybe you'll see him and get it autographed. I know I'm going to get the new version. Obviously, I'm going to get it autographed again. So he is an author. Also, he has his own podcast. Check him out on there. Journey of a Mother's Son is his blog. And it's the journeyofamotherson.com.
Yep, Journey of My Mother's Son.
.com. Right on, and check that out. And
that it's a beautiful website designed by this guy right here.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's cool. You know, it's more about the info on this one. It's really not about the look as much as it is about the stories and all your stories of your travels through RVing. I know you mentioned your mom in there multiple times. You also your golden retriever Euclid.
Yep.
Amazing. If you don't know, now you know. Kevin Euclid, Boston Red Sox.
Yep.
Come on now, the man with the best stance in baseball. And Dan's been telling me that you plan on doing some cool things with Euclid on the blog.
Yeah, Euc's actually going to start his own blog here in the next couple weeks.
Right on, man.
So he, as much as my wife enjoy what we're doing, he is living the life. He absolutely loves it. When he wasn't great at riding in a truck or a car before. He was just all over the place. It was, take him to the vet was just a nightmare. So we weren't sure how he was going to react to it. When we first got the RV, we went on a couple test runs out to Harrisburg to our one daughter's house and, a couple other places. And, at first we thought, well, maybe if Sandy sits in the back on the couch, he'll just lay down next to her and think, hey, this is just the living room's rolling down the highway, But he would be back with her, up with me, back with her, up with me, and just driving us crazy. Finally, at one point, we were up at my one daughter's house. We're getting ready to leave, and Sandy's like, look, I'm sitting up in the cab with you. He's just going to have to figure it out. And, I get in, she gets in, and it was like, just like that, he came up, sat down in between us, and was like, the world is perfect right now. I've got my one human on my right, my other human on the left, and this is wonderful. And he's been perfect ever since. And, he'll get to a point where, he'll go down now and lay down on the couch in the back. But, for the most part, he's in between us. We got, 2 vents right on the dashboard there, which are perfect nose level. So he'll have his nose right up there. And then every once in a while he'll sneeze. And then you get all kinds of dog snot on you. But we're used to it. We love it. There'll be times, I'm just driving down the highway and, he was in the back on the couch and he'll come up and just, nudge my elbow like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
You want to pet me a little bit,
Yes.
So he loves it, man. He just, trails that we've been on and, getting to dip his toes in different bodies of water and stuff like that. He absolutely loves it. So, he definitely wants to start his own blog and talk about it from the dog's perspective, how much fun he's having on this trip.
Right on, man. I'm definitely looking for that. And as we're getting ready to wrap up here, you've told us a lot of stories today. Your wonderful mom and all the things she's done. Your wonderful traveling with your wife Sandy and doing the baseball stuff, starting such a great organization, Big Vision Foundation that's out here. This is remarkable. And I feel like we could probably keep going on this podcast for sure. Because I feel like your mom could be an episode, and then your travel to baseball could have been an episode with all the awesome kids you were coaching and all the great things you've done. And again, nonprofit work, and all the things you're doing now with traveling. But out of all the things out there, the one thing I definitely wanted to ask you was, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received? And now that I feel like you've lived such a cool life, what's the one piece of advice you received that, probably still affects you today?
Actually, probably from my mom and my one daughter in a roundabout way was just to enjoy the journey, which again is what derived the title of the podcast, the title of the blog, the title of book number 2. Because, for a very long part of my life, it was just about, just balls to the wall, get to where we're going, and not really enjoy the journey. And, it's funny, of all the places that we've been, one of the things I enjoy the most is actually the drive. And it's funny, Sandy doesn't drive, at least not yet. I think she's driven the RV about a total of 100 feet so far, and that's just like, hey, I need you to move it a couple feet here. So if we added all that together, she's probably got about 100 feet under the wheel. But, I really enjoy just being on the road and, just seeing the world go by, and, enjoying the journey and enjoying the little things, because that's so important. I mean, we get so caught up in, all these, big things that are going on and, politics and this and that and everything else. But if we just focus on the little things, now we can make the world a better place, just little tiny bits at a time. I think that's so important. I mean, that's the subtitle of my podcast, is Many Little People in Many Little Places. Which is derived from a song by Michael Franti, where the opening lyrics of the song Gloria say, when many little people in many little places do many little things, makes the world a better place. And I think if we just focus on what we can do right here in our own community, the ripple effects of that, turn into big things. And if there's one thing I've been able to kind of recognize is those ripple effects as I'm going out and visiting with some of my players and, who are now in Atlanta and Florida and all over the place, and talking to them and being like, wow, man, this guy's making a big difference in his community, but it started here in Berks County. And so that ripple effect just goes on forever.
Amen, brother. That's a great way to end it, man. Thanks for coming in, brother.
I'm honored.
I appreciate it. It was definitely cool to see that you were in town. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I got my next guest.
Yeah.
Let me see if he can come on.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I appreciate you coming in, man, always. All right. Well, thank you for checking out this episode of Fred Talk. Visit us online at fxvdigital.com or your favorite social network at FXV Digital. Check out past episodes of Fred Talk on our YouTube channel, and make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. For Dan Clouser, Angie, and myself, thank you for watching, and never, ever forget, your Uncle Freddie loves you. Peace.
Bye.